Hi everyone, this is Dee Dee sharing another encounter with you from the internet. This one is from Cryptozoology News. It's titled, Group of Bigfoots Repeatedly Visited My Family and Kidnapped Me. A woman in Ohio claims that a group of Bigfoots recurrently visited her and her family starting in 1962, keeping her captive in a cave at the age of 12. The 55-year-old provided a full name, but asked to remain anonymous and to not reveal the isolated location where the incidents occurred. I prefer not to say where this took place specifically. No one wants an invasion of Bigfoot hunters on private lands. Let people go to the public lands of the Wayne National Forest to look for Bigfoot. People down in the hills love living where they live because it's quiet. There's fresh air, clean water for raising gardens and children, and being in the thick of nature to see the wild animals up close is something they all value very much. I'd rather that people work harder on gathering the mountain of eyewitness reports and experiences that have been hidden in the past decades in this state than to see them destroying nature, she told Cryptozoology News. She says she worked in the service industry for the past decade and that she was very active in volunteer work at the schools in the area. Reportedly, she wasn't the only one experiencing these encounters. They were witnessed in part by my parents. People do need to know that these things happen to me. It still pains me greatly, but at least I can talk about it now in some part, though without anyone knowing who I am. People are absolutely cruel, she explained. She also said that the incidents happened too many times to keep count of them, and that some of the neighbors had similar experiences, including some young boys fishing by the river. These events were all allegedly reported to the police. Once, she says, the huge one came back to take her and her dad shot it with a 12 gauge. The big one that had always come to take me out of my bedroom at night came this time during the daytime. Dad was about 15 feet from it. The shot was hitting this thing, and every time it hit, he'd stomp really hard on the ground with one foot after the other. My brothers and I ran up to my bedroom because the youngest said it was higher ground for better defense, and there were more over in the farmer's drainage ditch across the road. They were huge, too. I mean, what do you do as a kid of, say, 14 and you see something like that? Good thing my 3 brothers were there with me to help protect me. I yelled to them to leave or they'd be hurt. They finally left, and there was a lot of daylight left, though we were not to leave our 3 acres. My brothers wanted to go check on the neighbors to see if they were okay or if they needed help. The ditch where the beasts were purportedly hiding was across the road from the neighbor's front picture window. I can only imagine their horror at seeing what they were seeing, wondering if they were going to die. Sure enough, they looked pretty shell-shocked by the time we found them, she adds. According to the witness, most of the neighbors' children were hiding in the closet while the parents were out in the living room keeping an eye on that ditch. She claims the animals were of different sizes, male and female, but that the biggest one was 14 feet tall. He was a male with a head the size of a regulation basketball at least. His hair was long and about the same texture as mine, as I recall. The hair on all of them was about the same shade of brown, like the color of decomposed wood layer in the forest. I could see skin around his eyes that was tanned looking, and when there was facial hair, it was more sparse, with glimpses of skin showing through that area as well. I couldn't make out a neck. His chin was broad. His teeth were about the size of the nail on my middle finger, but they were more flat, and he had a mouthful of them, meaning the width of his bite was wide. His mouth was wide enough to show most of them. His eyes were dark with some white around them, less so than human eyes. They were kind, with crow's feet at the outer edge of them. His skin was weathered like anyone who spent too much time outside, like a farmer. His shoulders were very broad, though. I did see his collarbone on one side, which looked thick compared to a human's. He was muscular and heavily built, but in no way fat. There was an adult female and others who were almost as big as the female, but didn't seem to be young or old. I don't know if they were all related, but they seemed like a close-knit group. So there was the adult male and female who seemed to be a couple, and the 2 others that seemed to have maturity and body mass suggested that they were about what we would consider 40 or something in humans. Other than that, I couldn't tell what age any of them were. Then the horrific kidnappings began. Many of my memories of these creatures were so traumatic that my mind hid them from me. I've no idea what else I've experienced with them in my childhood yet. You see, the memories are still popping up to the surface, and I've got to tell you, it's not a pleasant thing to know you've been taken innumerable times by these creatures across many hills far from your home. I have no idea what transpired while I was with them, but each time they took me, I was out all night long, she explains. Due to the stress, the young girl tried to sleep during the days, but her mother wasn't happy about this. I was being used in a tug of war, and neither side was winning. Certain people at nearby churches were told what was going on with me, so they'd take me aside, anoint me with oil, and lay hands on me, praying out loud, and all I wanted to do was lay down and go to sleep from that circus. I was confined to the house for weeks, not being allowed to look out any windows. Sometimes, she says, things were peaceful, but occasionally the creatures became violent. I was 12 years old when I woke up underground in a cave that was dripping water from roots I could see stretching below the ground. You can't imagine the horror. I was screaming my lungs out, and after a while I ran out of force to make any sounds, but the air kept coming out of me. I could see these creatures surrounding me as I lay there unable to move on this great slab of rock. I wanted badly to scream some more, but I was just too tired to do that anymore. When I relaxed, they all started smiling and laughing. I thought, okay, they could have killed me and eaten me, but they didn't. Evidently, some of them are kind, but then again, I've seen cats play with mice for hours before they kill and eat them. These were clearly not childhood nightmares, as evidenced by the incident that took place around the time I was 12 or 13. That big, hairy male was in the field across the road from our house, about 15 to 20 feet in, and Dad was standing in our front yard shooting at him. What got my attention was this pounding like a pile driver used for drilling, but there was no metal sound. I kept hearing this really long, loud yelling too, and finally got to where I couldn't concentrate on my book, so I yelled to anyone who was downstairs what all the racket was outside, who the heck was yelling. I asked who the heck we knew in the neighborhood who could hold a scream for that long. I recognized the shooting and asked who was shooting also. My mom asked me questions each time he, the big Bigfoot, came back to my window and took me with him. He took me with him many, many times. They told me to tell him no, I wasn't going, and that, not seeming to work, she pretty much gave up asking me anything anymore. She did talk to Dad about how to stop this from happening, that she thought it was affecting my health and robbing us all of our sleep. There was this concern that if they did the wrong thing, this creature could kill everyone in the house. Mom often wept to my older sisters about this big hairy thing that got into the chicken coop and how she needed to help convince Dad to do something about this before someone got hurt. She told them not to go near me and told me not to go near them. She was quite fearful, and in retrospect, I can't blame her. Dad, for his part, over the years, at times, would ask me if I thought my big hairy friend was around anywhere. Then the family decided to move her bed downstairs, but this appeared to infuriate the beast even more. I remember hearing him pecking at my window upstairs, but I was strictly forbidden from leaving the area for any reason. He'd bang on the side of the house, and Dad would yell at him to go away, that he wasn't going to see me anymore, and that was that. He made these loud grunts and stomping on the ground to show his displeasure. Another time, according to the witness, she and her father were driving near the woods when they heard a strange scream. I was 19. We were on his front stoop talking before I left when there was this very long, very loud, deep scream like a man was getting murdered up the road in the woods. Sound did carry, especially on cold nights, but this had excessive volume to it, and no human could ever hold a full scream for that long. I thought someone was being hurt up there, and he refused to call the sheriff's office to report it. I thought my dad had lost it. But she says she called the authorities as soon as she got home. The things they said really made me wonder if they were scared of the woods. The police. Why were they deputies, she remembers. I asked if they couldn't look for vehicle tracks or boot prints up that lane to the gate, and they finally said they'd go down there the next day to check. They appreciated that I described the place and it helped them feel more at ease. They kept saying the station policy was not to go into the woods for any reason. The creatures also appeared to be able to communicate by using vocal sounds amongst one another. The sounds they made were a deep bass, laughing, chortling, snickering, and sounds like someone who couldn't pronounce words as well. They communicated this way with each other just as the male did with me. I had no interaction from the younger ones, and the female adult only smiled or sighed heavily while looking at me. She talked with the younger ones and the big male about me. She looked sad. They used their hands to motion, much like we do when we play charades. The neighbors and other kids at school, she reveals, also spoke of strange occurrences and the dangers of being stigmatized for telling their stories. We weren't talking about our experiences with them, but were listening to what others were having to deal with at their places, with the same creatures that they gave different names to. There were no Bigfoot or Sasquatch, but they were called monsters, creatures, monkey men, giants, etc. We listened to what other neighbors would tell us about them because they thought no one was likely to believe kids that heard and passed it on. The neighbors next door never spoke about their experience after the day it happened. The others were not home when it took place, except the old lady living on the farm next to the hill across the valley, but she didn't reveal that until later. We didn't see her that often, so those who had experiences were being judged and laughed at by someone who did not. The woman says that she's decided to tell her story because she feels that it would help others come forward too. So many times I've read authors saying they wish they knew, they wish those who knew would share what they know with the world. Well, that's why I've shared this. Talking about these things has not been easy. For the most part, the trauma associated with these things did cause what's called traumatic childhood amnesia. I hope it brings awareness to the suffering of experiencers and witnesses and allows them to speak openly about what's happened to them. Unless we all speak the truth, the world won't know what's been hidden and still being hidden from us. Do we want future generations to carry on living the same lie? Our world is richer and more interesting than most people could ever imagine. These are not just creatures. They are quite intelligent and resourceful enough to keep from being caught or killed, she said. Well, that's the encounter. I hope that you enjoyed it. And again, thanks for listening.
Okay, you folks,